Sorry. You don't need to clap. I haven't said anything yet. Thank you, everybody, for the warm welcome. Thank you, as ever, to Mary and the number of friends in the room who organise these events. Thank you also to Michael for all your work, and to a fabulous constituent of mine, Clive Goldthorpe here, who assists me greatly. And thank you to everybody for coming today. I just want to take a few moments to reflect on two aspects of the current political situation. But before I do, let me just mention that Councillor Adam Sykes here and I think the last time, Adam, we were on a panel together, it must have been the general election. Am I right? Yeah. And whilst Adam and I stood against each other in the general election, he serves his residents that are also my constituents as diligently as I hope I do. And on this issue, I fear we may not see much deep division along this issue, even if there are on other matters. There are not really on this. So my comments, I don't intend to be remotely party political this morning, not least because I, as one of the chairs of the Labour campaign for the single market, I spent a lot of my time in rooms of Labour Party members banging on about why European values are Labour values. So that's not the contribution I'm going to make this morning. Far from it. I just want to talk about a couple of things that I have learnt through this Brexit debate, particularly relating to our relationship with Ireland, on trade and what the current questions before us mean about our economy, and also just a brief word on identity and that part of the politics of this question. I'm currently engaged with members across the House of Commons in trying to persuade the Prime Minister that, firstly, we know a lot more about Brexit than we have ever done before, certainly at the time of the vote, and I think we're all asking ourselves a lot of questions about that and whether we ought not to, as Jurgen Klopp put it, sit down and have another think. But if we must Brexit, that we ought to do so in a way that's sensible and not deleterious to the economic prospects of the next generation, and that means probably the single market, possibly in the form of the EEA, and definitely the customs union. So I just want to back up that argument on two fronts, really. Firstly, in relation to trade. Now, forgive me 1 second. I'm not checking WhatsApp, honestly. I just want to read you this quote from Owen Paterson. Again, this is not intended to be party political, but I just think this typifies the misunderstanding that unfortunately there still is about Britain's trade today. And Owen Paterson said at the end of last year that the amount of trade is really quite small between the two countries. He said the Republic of Ireland and the UK. It's 5% of Northern Ireland's exports. It's 1.6% of the Republic of Ireland's exports. And I'm reading this quote from the fact check that the BBC did on it, and they found it to be wrong, basically, for it to be a misreading of the figures. But I think even on their terms it was wrong. But I think their terms are wrong, because the misunderstanding that we have at the moment about the British economy is it follows on exactly from the historical discussion that we've just heard, that the removal of barriers to trade through diminution of customs checks and the effect of borders on our economy has meant that we no longer make goods in one country and sell them to another country in order to buy the goods of the other country and import them. That's just not how it works anymore. So for firms that are in Northern Ireland or the Republic of Ireland, that idea of trade between Northern Ireland and the Republic simply makes no sense. They don't trade across that border, they make goods across that border that are then sold around the world. And the same is true of Britain. A frozen pizza that's made in a factory in my constituency might have its dairy elements brought from the Republic or the north of Ireland, and it's wheat from another part of the UK or from the Netherlands or somewhere else seamlessly across the border, and it's all constructed, possibly in one of the food manufacturing sites in Moreton or in Bromborough on the Wirral. Now, I would just simply say to you, where's that pizza from? And the answer is, at the moment, Europe. But people still have in their heads this kind of David Ricardo view of the world, where we all make our goods in one country and trade them with the other. And that's why some of the Brexiteers are obsessed by trade deficits. They constantly fixate on the fact that, the Germans will still want to buy our cars, whereas in reality we know that car parts pass across a border 6 or 7 times before they're in the end sold on. So that is the challenge that we have, to break down that mythology about how trade works. Meanwhile, even more important, research. If the United Kingdom and and the Republic of Ireland to a certain extent, if we have a particular edge, it's the place of our universities and the frankly world-beating research that we conduct. In this city region, we have the amazing tripartite work that's going on between the University of Liverpool, Unilever and its Global Research Centre at Port Sunlight, and the Daresbury Science Park. They are leading the future on material science, on the science, if you like, of manufacturing. And in order to do that, they need access to the best talent. There are 200 PhDs at the lab in Port Sunlight, in Adam and I's hometown, and the fact is we need access to that expertise wherever it comes from, and it's simply, I don't think, right that we should block off some of our best innovators from access to working with other scientists. It just won't work, and that's before you get into everybody who's involved in universities here will know all about the structure of funding and all the rest of it. So that's the reality of our economy, but actually there's an even more important reason to me in many ways, and this is my second point. There's an even more important reason to me why I think we ought to do all we can to maintain the current arrangements that support the Good Friday Agreement. And some of the folks that support Brexit have accused people like myself of kind of trying to use the Good Friday Agreement to somehow say that Brexit can't happen. And to be quite honest, given the history of this part of the country and Northern Ireland, that is an argument that I'm not even going to dignify with a response, really. It's so trite that it would be not right to answer it. But I think it unlocks an explanation that they don't really understand what the Good Friday Agreement is or what it does. And I want to just mention the philosopher Amartya Sen. As we're in these beautiful august rooms here, let me talk philosophy for a moment. Amartya Sen, one of the most important philosophers of this century, wrote a book called Identity and Violence. And he was trying to work out how cultural values could be sustained across different countries. Like, what did it mean to have Western values? And in this book, Identity and Violence, he lights upon the fact that when sectarianism takes hold, there's a particular phenomenon where people are separated into groups based on one feature of their identity. And he said that nobody can or ought to be defined by just one characteristic. And the attempting by sectarians to do this was a deeply dangerous feature of the modern world. And that we, those of us with democratic values, ought to resist this at all costs. And that's really what the Good Friday Agreement was all about. Let's take identity off the table. Let's allow people to look both ways and to see all aspects of their history, their culture, wherever in the island of Ireland that they're from. And to me, as somebody who grew up on the Wirral in this area, that's very important to me too. My home might have always been England. I was born here, but there's a massive part of me that values my Irish identity and culture and history and past. And I will not be told that I have to be one thing or another. I want to have that open sense of identity. And as was explained by our historian just then, our relationship within Europe has allowed us to do that. And I simply say this: Nobody who makes arguments for Brexit so far has explained to me how that aspect of the Good Friday Agreement can be maintained. And until they do, I will continue to make the arguments that I am. Thank you.